You're sitting in your cozy suburban home, surrounded by the trappings of a perfect 1950s American family. A husband who works hard, a wife who takes care of the house and kids, and two adorable little ones playing in the backyard. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find a complex web of social expectations, economic pressures, and personal struggles that defined life in the 1950s. The 1950s were a time of great social change, but also one of remarkable conformity. People were expected to fit neatly into narrow roles. Men were providers, women were homemakers, and kids were seen and not heard. This facade of normalcy was reinforced by the media, with TV shows and movies showcasing happy, harmonious families and suburban living. But beneath the surface, veterans were returning home, haunted by memories of the battlefield and struggling to adjust to civilian life. The war had also left a deep scar on the country, as Americans grappled with the reality of atomic bombs and the loss of innocence. This tension between the idealized America of the post-war era and the harsh realities of the war was a source of conflict and anxiety for many. The 1950s were also a time of great economic prosperity, which further solidified social norms. With the war effort over, industries that had been geared towards producing military equipment and supplies were redirected towards consumer goods. Suddenly, Americans had the means to buy and own more than ever before cars, refrigerators, televisions, and other appliances that became the hallmark of suburban living. As a result, the middle class expanded rapidly, and with it, the pressure to conform to societal norms. People who didn't fit the mold, the rebellious teenager, the working mother, the single person, were seen as outcasts or deviants. The message was clear. If you wanted to be accepted, you had to fit in. But what happened when the facade of normalcy was stripped away? Let's explore the darker side of the 1950s in our next section, where we'll delve into the secret lives of suburban housewives, the rise of consumer culture, and the social pressures that led to the suppression of individuality. As you look around your quiet suburban neighborhood, you might wonder what secrets lie hidden behind the perfect facades of your neighbors' homes. Were they as happy and content as they seemed, or were they struggling to keep up appearances? The 1950s were a time of great change, but also great conformity, and it's a conformity that would have far-reaching consequences for American society. You might be surprised to learn that the 50s were also a time of great social experimentation, with pioneers like Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem pushing the boundaries of women's rights and challenging the status quo. But for many women, the reality was far more complicated, a mixture of freedom and constraint, as they navigated the narrow channels of suburban life. As the 1950s progressed, the emphasis on conformity only intensified. People were encouraged to buy into the American dream, a house in the suburbs, a car in the driveway, and a family to boot. But this dream came with a price: the suppression of individuality, the pressure to conform, and the expectation of total devotion to the family. In our next section, we'll explore the darker side of this conformity, the secrets that people kept hidden, the pressures that drove them to extremes, and the consequences that followed when the facade of normalcy was stripped away. Stay tuned. Let's take a look at some of the key statistics that illustrate the economic prosperity of the 1950s. Between 1946 and 1955, the United States experienced a period of unprecedented growth, with the GDP increasing by over 40%. This growth was fueled by a combination of factors, including the post-war boom in consumer spending and the rise of the automobile industry. Now, let's consider the implications of this economic prosperity for American society. On the surface, it seemed like a time of great abundance and opportunity, with people enjoying unprecedented levels of prosperity and comfort. But beneath the surface, the pressure to conform and the suppression of individuality were having a profound impact on people's lives. As you sit in your cozy suburban home, surrounded by the trappings of a perfect 1950s American family, you might wonder what lies beneath the surface. Are you conforming to societal norms, or are you finding your own path in life? The 1950s were a time of great change, but also great conformity, and it's a conformity that would have far-reaching consequences for American society. As we move forward, let's consider some of the key themes that emerged in the 1950s. The decade was marked by a sense of optimism and possibility, as Americans looked to the future with hope and enthusiasm. But it was also a time of great social change, as people began to push back against the conformity and challenge the status quo. Now, let's take a look at some of the key figures who emerged during this period. Pioneers like Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem were challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of women's rights. But they were not alone. There were many others who were also working to bring about change and challenge the conformity of the 1950s. As we explore the darker side of the 1950s, let's keep in mind the complexities and nuances of this period. It was a time of great change but also great conformity, and it's a conformity that would have far-reaching consequences for American society. And remember, the 1950s were not just a time of conformity, but also a time of great experimentation and innovation. Pioneers like Kinsey and his team were pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and challenging social norms. But despite these advances, the pressure to conform and the suppression of individuality remained a powerful force in American society. As we move forward, let's consider some of the key takeaways from this section. The 1950s were a time of great change but also great conformity, and it's a conformity that would have far-reaching consequences for American society. The decade was marked by a sense of optimism and possibility, but it was also a time of great social change and challenge. Now, let's take a look at the implications of this conformity for American society. The pressure to conform and the suppression of individuality had a profound impact on people's lives, leading to feelings of anxiety, depression, and disconnection. But it was not just individuals who were affected. The conformity of the 1950s also had a profound impact on American culture and society as a whole. As we explore the darker side of the 1950s, let's keep in mind the complexities and nuances of this period. It was a time of great change but also great conformity, and it's a conformity that would have far-reaching consequences for American society. And remember, the 1950s were not just a time of conformity, but also a time of great experimentation and innovation. Pioneers like Kinsey and his team were pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and challenging social norms. But despite these advances, the pressure to conform and the suppression of individual, you might think the 1950s were a time of complete normalcy, but scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find a complex web of problems and contradictions. One of the most striking aspects of this era is the persistence of racism and segregation. Despite the civil rights movement gaining momentum, African Americans continued to face significant barriers to education, employment, and housing. Imagine being a young African American woman, growing up in a world where you're constantly reminded of your place. You're not allowed to sit at the same lunch counter as white people, you can't vote, and you're forced to attend separate schools. It's a reality that's hard to comprehend, but it's essential to understand the context of the 1950s. This wasn't just a problem in the Deep South. It was a nationwide issue that affected people from all walks of life. Now, let's fast forward to the scientific and technological advancements of the 1950s. This was a time of great innovation, with breakthroughs in fields like space exploration, medicine, and computing. However, these advancements also raised important questions about ethics and accountability. For example, did the scientists behind the development of the hydrogen bomb consider the long-term consequences of their work? Were they willing to sacrifice human lives for the sake of progress? As we look back on the 1950s, it's clear that the decade was marked by both progress and regression. On one hand, we saw the emergence of new technologies and scientific discoveries that transformed the world. On the other hand, we saw the persistence of social injustices and the exploitation of vulnerable groups. This dichotomy is a stark reminder that history is complex, and it's often impossible to reduce it to simple narratives. But what can we learn from the 1950s that can help us navigate the complexities of modern life? Let's explore the implications of this era in our final section. As we reflect on the struggles of the past, we can gain a deeper understanding of the world we live in today. We can see that the issues of the 1950s, racism, segregation, and the pursuit of progress at any cost are still relevant today. In the next section, we'll delve into the world of 1950s consumerism, where the rise of suburban living and mass production created a culture of consumption that continues to shape our lives. But before we move on, take a moment to think about the 1950s in a new light. What can you learn from this complex and often contradictory era? How can you apply those lessons to your own life and the world around you? You've made it to the end of our journey through the 1950s. As we reflect on this pivotal decade, it's clear that there are valuable lessons to be learned about social responsibility, collective action, and the dangers of conformity. The 1950s offer a powerful reminder that we're not just individuals, but members of a larger community. It was a time when people came together to tackle complex problems, like the polio epidemic, and made significant progress. The March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, was a testament to the power of collective action. As we face our own challenges today, we can draw inspiration from the 1950s and recognize the importance of working together towards a common goal. However, the 1950s also show us the dangers of conforming to societal norms and expectations. The pressure to fit in and meet certain standards led to a stifling of creativity and individuality. People were often forced to hide their true selves, and it wasn't until the rise of the counterculture movement that the status quo began to shift. As we navigate our own lives, it's essential to remember that true happiness and fulfillment come from being true to ourselves, not from trying to fit into someone else's mold. As we look back on the 1950s, we're reminded that history is not a linear narrative, but a complex tapestry of experiences and perspectives. The decade was marked by both incredible progress and deep-seated problems, and it's up to us to learn from both. By embracing the complexities of the past, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. As you reflect on the 1950s, think about the lessons you can apply to your own life. How can you take on a more active role in creating positive change in your community? What can you do to break free from societal expectations and be true to yourself? The answers may not be easy to find, but by exploring the complexities of the 1950s, you'll be one step closer to discovering your own path forward. As we come to the end of this documentary, I want to leave you with a final question. What does the past have to teach us about the present and the future? Join the conversation and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification